Have you ever imagined what it would be like to discover something so frightening that your life would never be the same again? Something that would make you question everything you knew about someone so close to you? Well, that's exactly what happened to a mother who, upon opening her son's closet, found something that seemed impossible to believe: a human head, wrapped in plastic bags. Think about it. What would it be like to be in her shoes? Your heart racing, your mind trying to understand what's happening, and that strange smell confirming the worst. At that moment, you not only feel fear, but also deep pain. How could someone you raised be capable of something so terrible? Get ready, because this story is more disturbing than you can imagine, and at the same time, it will leave you wondering, how can such frightening signs go unnoticed? Without further ado, let's get to the video. It was February 28, 2021, very early, around 2 a.m., when the police received an emergency call. A woman called and said that her son had driven his car into the Colorado River. The police were confused, not understanding exactly what was happening, but they soon went to the scene to take a closer look. When they arrived, they found a couple and their son, all very worried and asking for help. The scene was strange. The car was half in and half out of the river, with part of it still visible. Inside his parents' car, the son was warming up with his father, because he had just gotten out of the river. It was February, and it was cold, with the water freezing. He didn't have his pants on, which were wet and cold, so he needed to warm up. His mother, Terry, was outside explaining everything to the police. She said that her son, Brian, had called them in the middle of the night. He said he had gone out in the car to take a walk and think a little. Brian parked his car in an area near the river, where there are some boat ramps. People usually park their cars in reverse, with a boat attached, at these ramps, so they can easily get it into the water. But Brian didn't have a boat. He just wanted a quiet place to relax. The problem was that when he tried to get out, the car wouldn't move forward. He couldn't get into first gear, and the car started sliding backwards, going straight into the river. Water started to get into the car, and he panicked, but he managed to open the front window and get out of there, even though he was freezing from the icy water. So, in the end, the whole thing was a funny accident. And you can see that when the police arrive and hear the story that his mother, Terry, tells about what happened. When they understand the situation, they can only laugh at the whole mess. Terry even mentions that Brian is in the car, in case the police want to talk to him. They go over there, and Brian repeats exactly the same story, but something catches the police's attention. They ask him if he was facing or backing up to the river. Brian says he was facing away, but that's funny, right? After all, if he went there to think about life, you'd normally park facing the river, looking at the water to relax. But that's okay, it didn't make much difference. The cops joke with him, saying that the only contemplation he got was a $7,500 loss for his parents. Meanwhile, they try to call a tow truck to get the car out of the water in the middle of the night. Terry, worried, asks the cops if Brian can be let go home and warm up, since everything was taken care of and it was just an accident. They agree, and the parents take Brian home before returning to the scene to sort out the last details and get the car out of the water. Brian, who was 19, was fine. They finally got a tow truck, and the car was pulled out of the river. But then, one of the cops notices something strange. Something red was dripping from the trunk, right next to the license plate. It looked like blood. The police officer is worried and tells Terry, saying that maybe Brian got hurt and didn't even realize it because he was so scared. He suggests that his parents call to make sure he's okay. Terry calls Brian, who says he was already going to bed and assures her that he wasn't hurt or bleeding. She even thinks it could be from an old injury, since he had had surgery on his arm a few weeks ago and, who knows, the stitches came open. But Brian rules out that possibility. They remembered that, a few weeks ago, Brian was taking special effects classes and was using fake blood capsules for practice. Probably, one of those capsules burst in the accident, and what looked like blood was just the fake blood from the classes. With everything cleared up and the car out of the water, the police released the vehicle to the family, and everyone finally goes home, laughing about that unusual accident. Look how curious. The day after the car in the river, the police were called to the same place again. This time, it was about the disappearance of a homeless man named Warren Barnes. The person who reported it was a woman named Monique, who knew Warren well. She saw him every day and said he was an amazing person. Super kind. He was in his early 60s, and she would always offer him a chair and some books. But Monique wasn't the only one worried. A coffee shop employee also noticed something strange. Every day, without fail, at 6 a.m., Warren would show up for coffee. She even offered him the drink for free. Plus, Warren had a simple job, maybe volunteering or paying him a small fee, and he never missed work. He was very punctual. But that day, no one saw Warren, and that scared everyone. It was the first time in 4 years that he had disappeared like that. Monique had a photo of Warren, but it was from 2019, and he already looked very different. He had lost a lot of weight, so the police didn't have much information to start the search. Things got even stranger when Warren's co-workers got a call. Someone had found his wallet. And guess who found it? Brian's father. And do you know where the wallet was? Inside Brian's car. This is where the story takes another turn. After the police released the car the next day, Brian's father, who is also named Brian, but let's call him Brian's dad to avoid confusion, decided to clean the car. The engine had been damaged by the flood, so before taking it in for repairs, he wanted to make sure there was nothing inside. While cleaning it, he found Warren's wallet. Brian's father thought this was very strange and went to ask his son. Brian explained that on the night of the accident, he had seen the wallet on the ground near the river. He thought someone might come back looking for it, so he decided to keep it in the car. Inside the wallet was the name of the company where Warren worked. So Brian's father called the company to ask if anyone knew who the owner of the wallet was. That's when they discovered that Warren was missing. This left Brian's father with a flea in his ear. Now, about Brian. When he was 5 years old, he was diagnosed with ADHD and started taking medication. At school, he displayed difficult behaviors. Some children said they didn't feel safe around him, and he was involved in a few incidents. A doctor even suggested that Brian should be tested for possible psychosis. He was also diagnosed with autism. Despite his unusual personality, Brian had friends, but his interest in morbid things was quite striking. He was always making jokes about death, violence, and sinister things. One time, he posted a bizarre meme on Facebook. It was a drawing of a guy in bed with a goth girl next to him. In the image, the guy asked something about dessert. And the girl replied that she would be the food. Kind of weird, right? The story gets even more shocking. Let's take it one step at a time. Brian had a dark sense of humor and made heavy jokes, like the one in the cartoon where the guy in bed ate the goth girl, but at the end, she appeared with just her bloody head on the bed, without a body. Creepy, right? His friends said that people either loved his jokes or simply couldn't stand being around him. There was no middle ground. Brian was also fascinated by anatomy, forensic practices, and serial killers. He studied a lot about crimes and even kept a notebook where he wrote down details of famous killers, like Jeffrey Dahmer and the son of Sam. In this notebook, he wrote down the names of the serial killers, how many people they had killed, and what kind of killers they were. He even created his own code, like the Zodiac. His parents, trying to channel this interest in a positive way, suggested that he pursue a career as a forensic scientist or continue taking special effects classes, since he seemed obsessed with decomposition and morbid things. Brian also had social difficulties, such as avoiding eye contact, something his parents associated with his autism diagnosis. Now, back to the day after the car accident. While Brian's father was cleaning the car and finding strange things like a large knife and Warren's wallet, his mother, Terry, was at home taking care of other children. But something bizarre happened. Terry made a desperate call to the police after finding something in Brian's closet. She told the police that she saw a plastic bag with a very bad smell, full of maggots. When she opened it, she found what looked like a human head. Scared, she put the bag in the kitchen sink and called her husband, asking him to come home immediately. She also found another bag that she hadn't opened yet. The parents decided to act quickly. They came up with a plan. They called Brian, telling him that his brother needed the car for driving lessons and asked him to come home immediately. In the meantime, they notified the police, who would be there when he arrived. As soon as Brian arrived, he seemed to know something was wrong. He asked his father if that day would change anything between them, but he remained calm and polite. When the police arrived, they asked him if he knew why they were there. Brian calmly replied that his mother had found a human head and hands. He said, "Yeah, I saw a human head and hands." Meanwhile, a police officer went into the kitchen to check the contents of the bags. He confirmed that there was indeed a human head inside. The police immediately took Brian and his parents to the police station for questioning. Despite the gravity of the situation, Brian remained calm during the questioning. The story was just beginning, and the pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit together. Brian was being questioned at the police station, and his reactions were striking. He seemed nervous, shaking a lot, but he was polite and answered calmly. Some people believed that this could be due to autism or ADHD, which cause anxiety in times of stress. When the investigator asked how he had ended up there, Brian got straight to the point. I think it was because I killed someone. Without hesitation, he began to tell what had happened. He said that on the day of the crime, he was driving and saw something large wrapped in a tarp near a bridge. Curious, he stopped the car, put on gloves and went over with a knife. When he opened the tarp, he realized it was an elderly man. Without thinking much, he attacked him, stabbing him. Brian described the attack coldly, saying that he cut off the victim's head and hands, put them in plastic bags and threw the rest of the body in the river. He even said that he found it easier than he imagined and laughed at times, as if he were telling a random story. After the crime, he went home, cleaned the knife and washed his clothes. He tried to sleep, but since he couldn't, he decided to return to the scene to finish disposing of the body. During questioning, Brian also revealed that he was inspired by stories of serial killers and that he had harmed animals before. His parents, who had found a suspicious kit in his room in the past, never imagined he would go so far. Brian seemed to see the whole thing as a big joke, even when he described the darkest details. He said he felt no remorse or pleasure in what he had done, just a sense of neutrality. The story shocked everyone, and the warning signs about Brian's past behavior made it clear that something was wrong long before the crime happened. Brian seemed to feel no regret during the questioning. He even made a detailed map to show investigators exactly where each part of the crime took place, as if he were showing off a school project. Instead of remorse, he seemed to be waiting for some kind of acknowledgement, as if he wanted to hear congratulations. The only thing he regretted was what he lost because of the crime. He said that if he could go back in time, he wouldn't have done any of it, but not because of the victim. His motive? He was now in prison, unable to see his friends, access the internet or play video games. At first, Brian thought he would be in prison for 15 or 20 years, but the reality was quite different. He was given a life sentence, with no chance of parole. And this was a relief for many, because, with his profile, there seemed to be a great risk that he would commit another crime in the future. And that was today's story, full of impressive details and moments that are hard to believe. If you got this far, first of all, thank you very much. Now, take the opportunity to check if you are already subscribed to the channel. This is super important so you don't miss any of the upcoming videos, which always bring stories and curiosities like this one. And of course, if you liked it, leave your like to help the channel grow and reach more people. Oh, and comment below what you thought of this story and what topics you would like to see in the next videos. Your suggestions are very welcome. See you in the next video.